David Sable back again at Silverstein Studios in Lower Manhattan in the World Trade Center complex with Creativity from the Other Side, brought to you by New York Festivals. Creativity from the Other Side is where we talk to the most incredibly talented people in our industry and elsewhere and discuss with them what makes them creative, what keeps them up at night because their brains are roiling with incredible ideas and amazing feats that are gonna just totally astound us when they see the light of day. And today I'm so excited because we have a new FOD, friend of David. That's what happens around the show. I'm sorry about that, but it's just kind of what goes. Susan Perlbachs, yes, who is the Chief Creative Officer of, and I'm gonna look because I just wanna make sure I get it right, EVERSANA INTOUCH.
Correct.
And we're going to talk about EVERSANA INTOUCH because it's another, I think people know I have an affinity for Kansas City, and this is another incredible agency from that region. And I'm just so excited that you're here.
Likewise.
So thank you.
Thank you for having me, David.
Thank you so much. I think most importantly for today's discussion though, you're also going to be the jury president of the Health and Wellness Jury, our second year. Last year was our first and you were on the jury. And we'll talk about that later, just what you expect, what you hope to see, how all the people who are watching who are going to be submitting their incredible submissions and their brilliant ideas are going to win because you're going to tell them what they need to do and what you're going to be looking for and the things you're going to pay attention to. But first, I have to ask you one a really important question.
Okay.
You did your BA in Diplomacy and World Affairs.
I did. Yeah.
Wow.
It's a fancy term for international relations.
Well, that's good. And so how did you get to be Chief Creative Officer doing pharma? And by the way, Pharma Voice, one of the 100 most inspiring voices in the industry. And I have to tell you, I love that. Why? Because we see all the 100 most creative people in the world, but to be inspiring, that to me is way different. I just think it's much more real. So that's amazing. But now tell me how you got from there to there and wow.
So I had no real sights on advertising from the beginning when I was in college.
Because that was like the bucket, that you bang on the side for swill, right?
It wasn't really on my radar. I certainly had friends who had mentioned getting into advertising, but it wasn't really something that intrigued me at that point yet. When I was in college, I did a study abroad in the Middle East. I did an internship.
You were in Egypt.
I was in Egypt. It was a very, very interesting experience.
Fascinating.
Absolutely fascinating. And it's something that I certainly, especially right now, think back on a lot because I had traveled around that region for a while, but I'm digressing.
That's okay, we digress here. This is about creativity from the other side. We want to know everything about you.
Yes, I studied abroad in Egypt. I was in Egypt for a semester at the University of Egypt, and then also spent a little bit of time in Israel, the West Bank, and the Gaza Strip. So It was a very fascinating time, to say the least. I wanted to get into international relations, whatever that meant at the time. I joke and say that if I could, pick another career or if I could be anyone on this earth, I would be Carrie Matheson in Homeland. That was a fascinating job to me. Very, very interesting. But yeah, when I came to New York, I just absolutely enjoyed my time at the UN and fell in love with the city more than anything else, and decided that I wanted to move back here after I graduated, and went ahead and did that. And I did temp jobs, and I did a lot of different temp jobs, but one of them was landing me at an ad agency. And I thought, well, this is really interesting. And it stuck.
And it stuck.
It stuck.
And then how did you move into the pharma piece of it?
So I was working at Earl Palmer Brown, which is a now not around anymore agency.
They were good friends of mine.
Yeah, I enjoyed my time there. It was a great period of my life for sure. But that was also during the period of 9/11, and a lot of agencies were going under. And sure enough, Earl Palmer Brown was one of them as well. Another formative experience, to be honest with you. I saw them carting out the walls of cubicles, all kinds of things. When an agency goes under, it's a little sad. And I was definitely there till the better end. At that point, I decided I was going to get out of advertising, and I moved back to LA, where I'd gone to college, and stayed there for a little over a year doing script supervisor work, and decided I wanted to move back to the East Coast. My former art director from Earl Palmer Brown had gone over to pharmaceutical advertising, was looking for a partner, and I went in, and the rest is history.
Wow. And how'd you get to Kansas City?
So I did not get to Kansas City.
That's not exactly like, it's kind of in the middle someplace.
Yeah. So InTouch was a Kansas City-based agency, and I say was because it was acquired about 2 years ago by EVERSANA, thus now EVERSANA INTOUCH. But when I joined InTouch at the time, they had a lot of offices. There were 2 West Coast offices. There was San Diego and San Francisco, which are still there, Chicago, Kansas City, Boston, and New York. So I've always been out of the New York office, even though Kansas City was the original.
It's a big lesson to all of us, by the way, because it is a big agency with a lot of tentacles. The notion of a conglomeration of absolutely, completely integrated on their own agencies is interesting, but it's not a holding company as it sounds, because it's actually much more about the entire farmer experience as opposed to just the advertising experience. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Can you just tell us a little bit about it? Because I was fascinated. When I first started to read about it, I thought, okay, a holding company. So yeah, they got the 10 creative companies and 10. But then as I got deeper into it, and I realized that what they actually meant was we have all these companies that do all of these vertical or horizontal, I guess whichever way you're looking at it, pieces. And if you look at it in its totality, we could take a product from development to market with every piece that has to happen, including business, including creative, including distribution, whatever.
You've got it. That's it.
How do you like that? How do they pay attention?
But honestly, that
very
is
important.
Very well done. But that is pretty close to what it is. It's a commercialization company, and from my perspective, it's an interesting thing to be a part of as somebody who comes from the creative side of things and from advertising. We are the agency, which is one of those kind of business units within there, which, as you can imagine, is very, very different than the rest of the company. However, any business unit that you go to there, they're all extremely different. And honestly, some of the most brilliant people that I have ever met. So there's a consulting arm to this, but we even have a distribution plant, which I had the pleasure of touring, which was also a fascinating thing, and walking through that and kind of the assembly line of packaging things. But yes, they have something that basically can help any company commercialize a drug, whether it is a small startup, biotech, to a huge established big pharma company.
So health, wellness, pharma, whatever you want to call it, all three probably. What makes that different? So you're on the other side as well at Earl Palmer Brown. What makes it different? Why? So you obviously like it. You're obviously excellent at it. But what makes it really different? What do you think?
Well,
what can we learn?
I think there are so many things that are different about it.
Good.
I think that in the best way possible, I call us the land of misfit toys, and I really mean that as a term of endearment. I consider myself one of them. But There are obviously brilliant and amazing people in the general side of advertising, but what I love about coming over to the pharmaceutical side of it or the health and wellness side of it is that you meet such a diverse group of people. And it's amazing to be working with people who are PharmDs, MDs, have PhDs, some people who have never been to college, maybe didn't even graduate from high school. I think it's a wide range of folks that you meet, which makes every day even more fascinating. There are the obvious sides of that too. There is the regulation of it all. I actually didn't even realize that pharmaceutical specifically, advertising existed when I was at Earl Palmer Brown, but I was working for Novartis Animal Health, which is of course FDA regulated as well, and sort of started to learn a little bit about that world just because Novartis was a client. But definitely the regulations are different as well. But I think the other thing that makes it rewarding and that a lot of people speak about is that you truly have the opportunity to help people as well. I'm not selling Oreos, I'm not selling vodka. It's things that people genuinely need in their lives to keep them healthy, happy, alive.
So I always find, I happen to like health, and again, I think health, wellness, pharma, health, wellness, way less regulated, lots of claims being made that are whatever. Pharma, much more regulated, and I guess you have OTC, you have prescription, you have even prescription, you have direct to consumer, you have more focused on doctors and hospitals. So the matrix is actually quite complex. What I always found about that side of it, the regulated side, and this is what I'd like you to just talk about a little bit, is I always believe that if I give somebody a blank canvas, I just give you a white canvas and some paint and say, hey, be creative, you go wild. You can do whatever you want. If I give you a half-finished canvas and say, finish it, your creative talents are much more challenged because you could just finish it and do paint by numbers. You could add to it. You could enhance it. You could accomplish something completely different that just sort of complements it. But you have to put yourself into that, you're doing it inside the box. And I find that the regulation forces you you have this standard that you have to uphold, but you still have to be able to communicate. So what's that like? How do you manage that?
It's an interesting question. And in many ways, I've always felt like it's sometimes easier when you get put in a box. If you are staring at a blank page, I think people find that very overwhelming. So I don't know. Sometimes I actually think that it can help you, but I would say more than anything, no one starts thinking about the regulations, really. It's a creative exercise just like any other. And I did work on Absolute Vodka, and I have worked, in the general side of things.
For some.
It really can be. It really can be. But I think no one starts there, and you have to go and obviously then navigate the regulations. But it's a give and take, and talking to the MedLegal team and figuring out what you can say. And certainly we want to be straightforward and honest, and no one would ever do anything but be straightforward and honest and within regulations. But you start just like any other, I would say, creative assignment and work from there. And certainly we have client comments like everybody does, but then we also layer on the medical, the legal. But again, just like when you're working on Seagram's or whatever the account may be, and you are not, doing this on your own, it's not a unilateral decision you're making. It is a team effort, for better or for worse. And I would say it's the same thing in health and wellness or pharmaceutical advertising.
And how do you hold the line on the health and wellness where there are no particular regulations other than what, if depending on the platform that you're distributing on, they might have certain rules or regulations about what the claims that you can say, but others don't. So how do you hold that line?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So in other words, I've seen some stuff recently where the claims are so outrageous that you just look at it and say, like, oh my God, like how the hell?
So beauty?
Yeah, I think beauty. So I look at beauty as potentially a wellness, And I think, by the way, there's a lot of beauty today that does try to fit themselves into health and wellness as opposed to saying we're cosmetic. So as those lines blur and the claims blur, how do you work with your team to keep your integrity? Like, what's the rule? The client pushes you and says, no, this is real. Like, here you go. What do you do?
Well, I certainly would say that
hopefully your clients don't. But,
well, I was going to say, I very much trust that my clients have integrity. And I will be honest, I have not come across one that does not. And that is the truth.
Sadly, I have in my life, but I've been with this longer
Sorry.
than you. Because I know it's terrible, right? It's terrible.
Yeah, I mean, I think
no, but I'm serious though, because there are claims out there. So how do you judge it? You're going to be on the jury. Where's your line?
Well, in terms of being on the jury or what we're evaluating, I would say first and foremost, we are not evaluating any of the claims. It's the creativity brought to the table and how you are communicating that. So in terms of claims that are made in a spot or, within a concept, I think we're looking for the idea versus the claim itself, which also, especially as the health and wellness jury chair, I always tell people, evaluate the creative, not the cause. That's another thing. You've got to look at the creativity, not necessarily, what the piece is for.
But isn't the context important though? Because we're going to talk about some work of yours that I think is amazing, actually, and I want you to. But I think it's and I get the idea, but I think the context, to me, is what made it so powerful.
So
because I couldn't have just taken that idea and run with it any place. I think it's so core to the context of the idea.
I agree with that, but I would also say I've seen a lot of bad oncology advertising. So again, I think that you need to approach what you're doing and come forth with the best idea, and not necessarily look at again, if you're talking about cancer, what the cause might be.
Right. So I'm going to, forgive me for reading, but I want to get this right. But this really intrigued me. 5 ways creative thinking can impact human behavior. Now, the truth is, as I read it, it really relates specifically to the category, which I think is really interesting, and to something that you just said. So I'm just going to read them to you, and I want you just to talk about each one a little bit, because I think this was just, it really talked to me. I thought it was really great. So 5 ways creative thinking can impact, pay attention, can impact human behaviors. Masterclass. 1, unite patient and family.
Oh, we're going one by one.
Yeah,
okay.
Of course. Yeah, I don't want you to have to remember more.
Yeah, so...
And we don't have a monitor, like people can't see. We're not reading off a monitor here, folks. This is like...
So I'm going way back, because I think you took that from an article, correct? Okay. So unite patient and family. So I think that was many, many years ago that I wrote this. However, the thought behind that is...
I do my research.
I love it. I should have done my research on myself. When you're looking at health or pharmaceutical advertising, or, I would just say the health and wellness category, a lot of times you can't look at just the patient themselves. So for example, we were just talking about oncology. If I'm a mom and I'm suffering from breast cancer, as somebody who's speaking to that person, you can't just look at them. You have to look at their whole family unit, their whole social system, because they're making decisions not just for themselves, they're making it within the context of the whole family.
A lot of people.
So if I don't have, money to put food on the table, I might be prioritizing something beyond my oncology care. So you really need to look at the whole system to truly have a meaningful conversation and to understand what's happening in that person's life.
Which,
it's not
of course,
about that person.
impacts the creativity, it impacts the choice of media, your segmentation, but in different ways than you might actually think.
Right.
That's amazing. Okay, 2, create unique partnerships. You're impressed with yourself.
I just want to make sure that that I'm actually hearkening what I wrote before. But I think in that regard, again, it's the social system surrounding that person. So you can't necessarily just look at them as a pharmaceutical company or whatever product that you are talking to them about. You need to look at the other things within that system right there. You can't look at the individual. You have to look at everything holistically. Are they part of a diabetes program? Are they part of, anything else that's going on in their lives?
Or do they play golf? And maybe that's a unique partnership.
And that too,
right?
Yes.
Okay.
But you've got to look at the whole thing.
The next one I love, which I think is sort of obvious, but it's not actually when you see some of the work out there. Translate key health concepts into real world context, which I think you probably could say simply, just say it in language people understand.
I definitely think that's one aspect of it and love that. I think it's also leaning into the cultural context of things too. Again, what else is going on in that person's life? What are their beliefs? What's going to speak to them?
Mm-hmm. 4. There's only one word. I don't have to be so nervous.
What comes next?
Work within cultural norms.
So I actually just touched on that a little bit before, but you need to look at, I don't have an example at the tip of my tongue at the moment, but you have to look at somebody's, again, entire existence. And I actually think back to...
So they get it. So that it's not foreign to what they do.
Right. Or I think of I think it was called life-saving bindi, thing that I think delivered iron or iodine. But again, kind of looking at where is this person in their life? What will they respond to? What do they value? What does their culture value?
And the last is sort of related, but maybe not 100%. Create cultural relevance.
Yeah.
Which is where
all of these are sort of intertwined. But I would definitely
you
say
said them, not
I
really,
know, but I didn't go back and look.
By the way, I just want everybody to pay attention to this. I do not share questions with my guests.
And this is maybe 7 years old, I might add.
Because I want it to be as spontaneous as possible. So maybe I learned a lesson. I don't know.
Well, 7 years was digging a little deep. But I would say that the cultural...
I tried to go back further. But
the cultural norms, I think, again, there's a lot of work out there that does that really well. I just mentioned life-saving bindi. I remember Lucky Iron Fish years ago did that too, even though I know there was controversy around that. But again, I think looking at the culture of the people that you're speaking to is imperative. You can't approach your communications bringing only yourself to the table. I mean, and again, I think that's sort of intuitive. You have to know your audience, but especially given that a lot of the communications are, based, they come out of the US a lot, or, Europe. So you just really have to understand there's more than just you.
So she's going to go back and look this up, I swear to you. You should also look it up. It's easy to find online. Google or Bing it. I say Bing because Microsoft is a client. And I always mention Bing. But do look it up because the article is actually pretty interesting. It goes into depth. So it's worth your time. So let's talk about work.
And I'll look it up too.
Let's talk about some work. I want to talk about 2 pieces, very different. And I thought both spoke to me. I thought they were really amazing. The first is Erase the Line. It spoke to me for a lot of reasons. I think it was the craft, it was the idea, it was the ethos of it. I thought its sensitivity. So tell us about it, how it came about, the work, because I think it's really important to describe it. Everybody will go look it up anyways.
So we were working with a pharmaceutical company on a breast cancer drug, and the Chrysalis Initiative was, or Jamil Rivers, who runs that, we were in contact with her and with this organization working towards the launch of this drug. That was how we met her and started working with her. Unfortunately, the breast cancer drug failed its trials and did not come to market. However, we continued working with Jamil. And her story is fascinating. Her story spoke to me. She is a mother of 2 and was diagnosed with breast cancer, and definitely as she was navigating the healthcare system, did feel that she had to advocate for herself more than someone with white skin may have. And she basically became the superstar of the hospital where she was. And people started to go to her and ask advice to how to navigate care. How can they get the best care possible? And she had done so much research and really was an expert. And really decided that she had to launch the Chrysalis Initiative to bring this to a broader range of people. It was an amazing thing to see this whole thing rise. She was on the Good Morning America show. I mean, Chrysalis Initiative really became a front and center, organization for Black women suffering from breast cancer. And we have done a lot of work with her, and she is right there every step of the way. Everything, I don't want to say it was co-created, but she sees all the ideas almost in real time as they go. Yeah. And she really does influence how we articulate things, the language we use, and has taught us so much and been an integral part of producing this whole thing. You mentioned the craft, which I agree, the craft, amazing. And Nick Caponier was the person who oversaw that. And I feel like we have to say his name anytime we talk about this piece, because he really, really made sure that every single part of that was expertly crafted. There was nothing left to chance, and really made sure that it was an impeccably produced piece.
And Erase the Line, explain the idea.
Well, so it started we originally were actually going to do a bit of a social media campaign there. And for every donation with the inequality signal there, a pixel would come out of that line. So we were, again, working to erase the line and make it just an equal sign. It really
right.
certainly...
So that's it. Just to understand, erase the line. So the equality sign, the inequality addition to the equality sign, and it's erasing the inequality slash.
And it took off. I mean, we really were astounded by the response to the campaign and the traction that it got. It got a lot of PR, certainly won a lot of awards. And we were very proud of those awards, but I would say even more than that, we're proud of the lens that we were able to put and the spotlight that we were able to put on Jamil and her organization. And it didn't end with Erase the Line. We continued that. And the second year of the campaign, we did Inequality You Can't Ignore, which was another thing where it was almost astounding. So she wanted to go into hospitals and put in installations and materials that would educate folks and let healthcare professionals know, take a look. Inequality exists. We're not saying you do it necessarily, or you're the problem, but inequality exists. And in the institution that you're working in. We were kind of surprised the institutions did not want us in the hospital. And for, a hot second, we thought, wow, well, this is kind of dead in the water. But again, really quickly, the creative team pivoted. Not much will, keep us down. And we decided at that point we were going to do it around the hospital and outside the hospital and do interactive kiosks where healthcare professionals would take their phones out at the bus stops or whatever and look at these statistics and the inequality that truly should not be ignored. And it was, again, one of those projects where we interviewed some of the women who had been treated for breast cancer, and hearing the stories and the things that they went through, it's heartbreaking. And I feel like the more that we can get the word out of how to advocate for standard of care treatment when you're when you're going through the breast cancer treatment in the system, is anything we can do, we will.
So one more piece of work.
Yeah.
The ticking
lime bomb.
Like, who knew? By the way, I haven't slept since I read it, because I thought,
scary.
I stay away from high grass and walking around deer and stuff. Like, who the hell knew that the city was more dangerous than going out into the field?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think the impetus for that really was nobody does know this. You don't realize that Lyme disease is on the rise in urban areas, in Central Park. Oh,
don't tell me that. I love Central
Park. In Central Park. Sorry. It's there too. So we did a campaign that was originally the outdoor campaign, which is that giant ticking tick bomb, which again, impeccably crafted, absolutely, will stop you in your tracks. Interesting. But then once we had done that for the Global Lyme Alliance, in working with them, we came across the fact, really, that Lyme disease is more difficult to spot on Black and brown skin. And at EVERSANA INTOUCH, we are always on the forefront of technology. It was, started as a digital company, and we've got some amazing people in our innovation group, and we paired them with creatives and then a group of doctors to ultimately use technology that's out there to help speed diagnosis of Lyme disease in people of color.
Right, and a little app. It's actually it's a really great program. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it was worth mentioning. Tell us about the jury. What are we looking for? Where do we pay attention as you think about what you are going to send in, as you all should be, your best work and your most creative work and your best thought out work? What are you looking for?
I would say first and foremost, and you've heard me say craft a number of times, so craft is important. However, first and foremost, I would say the idea. What was the idea that was brought to the table? And I'm a fan of craft. You've got to use it, and it is a tool in our toolbox, but it is not a substitute for the idea itself. So if you've just got something that looks amazing, maybe enter it in craft. But for any other category, I would say that the idea has to come first. Okay. And then I think make sure that the jury knows what you are setting out to do and who the audience is. Sometimes, believe it or not, that's not clear. So who is the audience? And then obviously, what was the success of the campaign? And a lot of people want, hardcore, stone cold facts. I feel like, we all know that sometimes those KPIs are a little elusive, so I don't always look for the hard stats, but what did you seek to accomplish and what happened? Was there a lot of PR? Where was it featured? Was it on the news? Was it in a newspaper? Things like that.
Well, we look forward to a great jury, great work, and we'll have you back and with some of your jurors, and we'll talk about the work, we'll look at the work, and you can tell us what worked, what didn't. Very exciting. Yes,
I would agree.
So be hard on the work, be good to the people.
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, we work in a really difficult industry. That is absolutely my mantra. We work in a very difficult industry. I think it's long hours. It can be grueling. Our creative has to go through a gauntlet before it ever gets out into the world. And, I think that a lot of times you hear no more than yes. I think we need to make sure that we are, taking care of the people, making sure that they feel valued. However, that doesn't mean that we are going to be soft on the work. I sit in meetings and kill things pretty hard. I'm fairly candid. So people sometimes when they first meet me or first go through a review might think, oh my gosh, what is happening? And then I'll turn around and, talk about going out for drinks. But I just think people need to know when the work is being beat up, it is for the good of the work. It is for the good of the agency. We need to be the very best that we can be, but don't take it personally.
Right. Be good to the people, be hard on the work. I love that. I think that's such a great mantra for our industry. And you're so right. And one last thing, Mr. Music, please.
Oh my God.
Here you go.
I'm not karaokeing. I won't do it.
Come on. Let's hear it.
I can't do it. But Farouk, our CEO, is a huge karaoke guy. And so everybody has to have a go-to song. It is genuinely a must.
And so why is that? Tell them what it is. Joan Jett, your go-to song.
Well, I love Joan Jett. I will say that. It brings me back to my early years. And you don't have to really sing, you can scream.
That is creative. I love that. That is awesome. Well done. So you don't have to sing, you can actually scream. Talk about a brief. Wow. Amazing. I love it. That's craft for you. That's what I like to hear. So, Susan Perlbachs, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a new FOD, a friend of David, and you actually get a nice little t-shirt that says it with the hidden FOD, so you can like brag about it. And we look forward to what you choose in the jury and to the work that you show us. And everybody, go look up EVERSANA INTOUCH. It is the biggest agency you have never heard of. It is incredibly interesting. And there's a lesson there for all of us, honestly. As I looked at it, because I came at it with this bias thinking that it's okay, just like some little holding company kind of deal. And it's not. It's really, really different. Very focused, a lot to learn from what they do and how they approach the market. And you gave us a couple of examples. And with that, David Sable for Creativity from the Other Side, brought to you by New York Festivals. Get your entries ready. Start thinking about what you're putting in. Think about the categories that you're going to be in. Think about, you're going to meet all of the jury presidents. You'll have a chance to listen to each one. And have a good day.